In the vast stories of history, men's names echo loudly. Caesar, Napoleon, Genghis Khan, Mandela. But every so often, if you lean in close enough, you'll catch the whisper of a woman's name. One that doesn't come up in school books or trending listicles. One that reshaped a civilization, commanded armies, and ruled with an iron grip for decades. Her name? Wu Zetian, also known as Empress Wu. She didn't inherit power, she took it. In 7th century China, when women were barely allowed to learn how to write their names, Wu Zetian climbed her way into the throne and declared herself emperor. Not empress consort, not dowager empress, the emperor. The only woman in Chinese history ever to do it. Yet somehow many of us have never heard of her. Maybe it's because her story doesn't fit that strong but gentle box that history prefers for women. Or maybe it's because she broke too many rules, outwitted too many men, and made too many bold moves for her chroniclers to stomach. But if power is measured by influence, strategy, and sheer guts, Wu Zetian belongs in the same breath as the world's most legendary rulers. This is the story of how a teenage concubine became the most powerful woman in history. Wu Zhao was born in 624 under an eclipse, which was a sign that, in ancient China, meant something unusual was coming. Her family was wealthy, respected, and politically connected. Her father, Wu Shiwei, worked in timber before rising to become a high-ranking official under the Tang dynasty. Her mother came from the influential Yang clan, with ties to the imperial family. That mix of status and ambition gave Wu access to something most girls never touched: books. While other noble daughters were trained in needlework and silence, Wu read history, studied politics, practiced calligraphy, and debated philosophy. She was barely out of childhood when people started calling her Wu Meinyang, Glamorous Lady Wu, a name given her by Emperor Taizong himself when she later entered his court. But long before the palace doors opened, Wu already had a sharp tongue, a sharper mind, and no patience for being overlooked. At 14, she was summoned to the imperial court as a kairen, a low-ranking concubine, barely noticed in a sea of silk and scheming. Most girls in her position faded into the background. Wu paid attention. She memorized the structure of the court, watched how decisions were made, and built quiet relationships. It was during this time that she served as a kind of secretary, handling documents and learning the inner mechanics of power, all while still in her teens. When Emperor Taizong died, custom demanded that his concubines, including Wu, retire to a Buddhist convent. For most, that would have been the end of their story, but Wu had no intention of disappearing. Somehow, and history still debates the details, she returned to court. This time not as a former concubine, but as the new emperor's lover. Emperor Gaozong was Taizong's son, and when Wu reappeared calling herself Wu Zhao, the court was stunned. They should have known better than to count her out. Her re-entry wasn't just bold, it was strategic. Wu had learned how power moved. She'd studied it, lived among it, and now she was going to wield it. She stepped back into palace life with a new name, a new title, and a plan. As she rose, the names kept coming. Wu Ho, when she became empress consort. Wu Zetian, when she crowned herself emperor. And eventually grander titles, like Zetian Dasheng Huangji, Holy Golden Goddess Emperor, and Son of Heaven. Names only once spoken of emperors, now claimed by her. At first, it didn't look like she'd make it far. The imperial court was no place for sentiment. Even though Emperor Gaozong had brought her back into the palace, he had rivals, fierce ones. Empress Wang, the emperor's wife, and consort Xiao, his favorite, weren't about to let Wu Zhao climb without a fight. But Wu didn't need brute force. She had something more dangerous: patience, observation, and timing. She knew how to read a room, when to hold her tongue, and when to strike. Inside the palace, Wu Zhao moved like she belonged. She treated the emperor's affections like a given and stayed close to those who had influence over daily decisions. While other women fought for attention, she built alliances. She made sure her presence was felt in ways that weren't always loud, but were always smart. She whispered in the right ears. She showed kindness to the emperor's attendants. And slowly, the emperor's gaze stopped drifting towards others. What happened next changed everything. Wu Zhao gave birth to a daughter, the emperor's child. But just a few weeks later, the baby died under strange circumstances. Some say it was a tragic accident. Others say it was deliberate. One thing's certain: Wu Zhao accused Empress Wang of killing the child. The scandal rocked the court. No one could prove it either way, but suspicion was enough. Wu Zhao's grief and fury turned public opinion. Even those who disliked her hesitated to side with the empress. Gaozong, torn between loyalty and desire, leaned toward the woman who had returned from exile and captured his heart. Soon after, Empress Wang and consort Xiao were charged with witchcraft. Their fall was swift and merciless. Gaozong stripped them of their titles, and with little ceremony, Wu Zhao was named Empress Consort. She had won, but this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Being empress meant she had proximity to power, not power itself. Wu Zhao knew that. She watched as Empress Gaozong fell ill. As his strength waned and his vision blurred, seizures plagued him. His decisions became inconsistent. That's when she stepped in, not as a wife, but as a partner in governance. At first, she claimed she was only helping him with administrative duties, but soon she was attending court meetings in his place, issuing edicts under his name, even speaking to foreign envoys. Ministers started addressing her directly. Some were outraged. A woman taking on the emperor's responsibilities? It felt like blasphemy, but others saw results. Under Wu Zhao's guidance, the court functioned better. Appointments were made based on skill, not family name. Corrupt officials were removed. Revenue increased. Infrastructure improved. She didn't just keep things afloat, she improved them. Still, not everyone was impressed. Confucian scholars, steeped in tradition, whispered that a woman's role was behind a screen, not on a throne. They wrote essays on propriety, preached about the virtue of silence and obedience. Wu Zhao ignored them, or rather, she silenced them. Some, literally. She had her own secret police, her own network of informants. If someone crossed the line, they vanished or were charged with treason. Her power expanded with each move. When Gaozong's health continued to decline, she made sure their sons didn't gain too much influence. She played them against each other, removed those she couldn't control, and when one son eventually took the throne after Gaozong's death, she acted as regent. On paper, she was ruling on behalf of the emperor. In reality, she was the one giving orders. People talked, of course. They always did. Some called her ruthless, others said she was possessed by ambition, but they couldn't deny the efficiency of her rule. She promoted people from outside the aristocracy, gave lower-class scholars a chance to rise through the ranks, and invested in public works. For the first time, there was room for new voices in government, and for many that mattered more than who sat on the throne. Even so, her position wasn't secure. Regents were meant to step aside. Wu Zhao had no intention of doing that. She made it clear this wasn't a temporary arrangement. This was her court now. When her son proved difficult, she removed him. When her enemies plotted, she outmaneuvered them. She installed statues of herself alongside the emperors, commissioned writings that traced her lineage back to ancient rulers. Everything pointed toward one inevitable outcome. She wasn't going to rule through someone else. She was going to take the title herself. And in 1690, she did. Wu Zhao declared herself Emperor of China, not Empress Dowager, not Regent, Emperor. It was the first time in history a woman had claimed that title outright. She didn't dress it up. She didn't apologize for it. She rewrote the rules. The traditionalists howled. Some refused to use her new title. She replaced them. Others tried to revolt. She crushed them. She created a new dynasty, the Zhou dynasty, separate from the Tang, with herself at the center. The country didn't fall apart. It kept moving. It kept building. And the people, many of whom had benefited from her policies, accepted her reign. She built temples in her honor, ordered the carvings of a towering statue of herself into a mountain. Coins were minted with her face. Her name, once erased, was now etched into everything. It wasn't ego, it was strategy. If history forgot her once, she made sure it could never do so again. Power, for Wu, had never been about brute force. It was about presence, control. A grip so subtle it often looked like grace until it crushed you. So when she finally claimed the title of emperor, she did what emperors do. She ruled. Not from the sidelines, not behind a puppet, but in her own name and with her own hand. She rewrote the rules of succession, recast the sacred cauldrons of authority, and placed herself at the very center of China. But even the strongest reigns are tested. Hers came under fire from all sides. The borders boiled. The Tibetans defeated one of her armies. She demoted her generals without hesitation, a statement, perhaps, that failure under her rule was not tolerated. But she wasn't done with them. They were restored later to their ranks. Maybe she understood loyalty wasn't always instant. It could be earned again. Then came the Khitan Rebellion. The Zhou provinces were threatened. Armies she sent were crushed. The court must have whispered, questioned. But she didn't panic. She cut deals when she had to, even giving in to harsh terms to keep peace with the Turkic Khagan. She made compromises, not because she was weak, but because she was calculating, letting go of a piece to protect the board. That's how she played. Inside the palace, power was shifting again. She started leaning on new faces, Zhang Yiji and Zhang Jiangzong, young, charming, and dangerously ambitious. The two brothers became more than confidants. They were given titles, land, and influence. And in their rise, the shadow of the old secret police crept back in. Wu's earlier purge of the infamous Lai Junchen had brought some calm, but the court never fully forgot how sharp her knives could be. When the Zhang brothers moved against one of Wu's sons and other powerful figures, they didn't get away with it. Wu's response was swift, forced suicides. Her own family members weren't spared. She didn't hesitate. Power came first. But even she knew time was no ally. In her later years, she began to soften, not her rule, but her alliances. A compromise emerged. Her old son, Li Jie, was brought back from exile. She named him Crown Prince again. A controlled exit strategy, maybe, or perhaps an acknowledgement that the Wu bloodline wouldn't last forever on the throne. She had tried. Her nephews had lobbied hard to replace the Tang with a permanent Wu dynasty, but she resisted. The dynasty she built would remain hers, but not for her heirs. The threats never stopped. The Khitan flared up again. Then the Tibetans collapsed in internal strife, giving her a brief peace on the borders. But inside the walls of her empire, the Zhang brothers continued climbing. She grew more reliant on them, too reliant. Even members of the Wu clan began bowing to them. That kind of influence didn't go unnoticed. When her grandson, granddaughter, and grandnephew privately criticized the Zhangs, it cost them their lives. Another whispered conversation, another sealed fate. Still, Wu was never static. Even in her last years, she promoted new talent. She was old, yes, but her instincts didn't age. She could still spot sharp minds. But she couldn't stop the storm brewing inside her court. The Zhangs had made enemies. Their arrogance turned even loyalists against them. And when rumors of treason began to swirl again, this time it wasn't Wu who moved first. It was her ministers. In 704, her body started failing her. She became sick, then sicker. The Zhangs limited who could see her. Ministers weren't allowed near. The silence fed suspicion. The walls of her own palace began to conspire. She pardoned the Zhang brothers mid-investigation, maybe trying to protect her legacy or just too tired to fight on all fronts. But she had taught her court well, taught them how to wait, how to strike. In 705, as she lay weakened, a group of officials led a swift and silent coup. The Zhangs were killed. Changzhen Hall, her sanctuary, was surrounded. They forced her to abdicate in favor of her son, the very man she had once dethroned. The restoration of the Tang dynasty was celebrated. The Zhou era she had carved into history was over. She didn't resist. On paper, she was honored, Empress Regent. She was moved to a subsidiary palace, still clothed in titles, but power had slipped. The woman who once held the court in her palm now had guards at her door. On December 16, 705, Wu Zetian died. Wu Zetian may not be a household name, but her impact is undeniable. She showed what leadership looked like when it wasn't bound by tradition. She proved that ruling with intelligence and conviction mattered more than gender. She's a reminder that power doesn't always look the way we expect it to. It doesn't wear the robes we're used to. Sometimes it shows up in the form of a girl who refuses to stay in the convent. Even today, in boardrooms and ballot boxes, in protests and parliament, the legacy of women like Wu is heard through women who push back when told to wait their turn, who rewrites the rules rather than accept them, who sees a locked door and thinks, "I'll build my own house." Now that you know her name, say it out loud. Tell someone else, because Empress Wu was never meant to be forgotten.